Thank you. Thank you very much to everybody. I just want to say hello to Catherine. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And also thank you to Vodafone and to Hevolus Innovation. And Catherine and Hevolus and Vodafone will present some really innovation, a new solution for museums and cultural site, which I think will be of great interest for this specific audience and for all the visitors of the RO.ME Museum exhibition. I don't want to say anything else, not to waste time and to give the floor to Catherine. Just we will be very pleased if you then in the future, whenever it will be possible, you will accept our invitation to be really with us. Now we will really appreciate. Thank you very much, and we leave you the floor.
Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. My name's Devine. I'm based in Seattle this morning where it's still dark, and I am so terribly disappointed not to be able to attend in person, but thrilled to have the opportunity to speak with you all today. In Microsoft, my role, I have a really very, very privileged role to be able to work with museums around the world, and my role is as Global Business Strategy Lead for libraries and museums. So I specifically focus on museums and what are the needs of museums in digital transformation and how can technology help further that. And prior to the pandemic, I had the tremendous opportunity, certainly had the opportunity to visit Italy and worked very closely with the Italian team and Italian museums. But now I get to do it all virtually. So I'm going to show a presentation. You won't be able to see my face, unfortunately. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes and then we're going to introduce our colleagues from Hevolus. So let me just quickly get started here. So hopefully this all works. Someone let me know if it doesn't. So I want to talk today about immersive experiences, digital transformation generally, and immersive experiences in particular. And I'm really going to show you some exciting technologies around where the world is going in terms of immersive experiences. Many of us have seen, augmented reality and even virtual reality over the last 5 years, but that's just the start. All technology is always evolving and evolving. That's just the start. You're just getting a taste of what's possible there. We start to get into a brave new world. So I hope you'll find this interesting. As I mentioned, my name's Devine. I'm originally Australian. I live in the United States, based in Seattle. And as I said, the tremendous privilege of working for Microsoft and all of their amazing technologies, but thinking about how it applies to museums and working with museums all over the world. I want to first start with how to position technology in museums. So, one of the things that I think we often do is think about, well, we need technology in our museums, but we're really not sure why. And I think it's important to always bring it back to, and this goes back to my sort of very long career in technology before all the internet and all the fancy things, where we were always taught that, technology is about achieving, it's about solving some problem. Well, not so much solving some problem, but it has to be tied to what the organization is trying to achieve. And so I translate that into museums with the idea that it's about trying to achieve the mission of the museum. And I think it's always helpful to bring it back. It's a tool. Technology is a tool. And so I look at it as, how can you use technology to do things that you can't do otherwise? How could you expand your reach? That's a great way to use technology. How can you provide deeper engagement? How can you reduce your cost base? All of these kinds of things. And so I think it's important to not make technology a showpiece, but about how is it achieving those things. And you're going to hear me talk, keep going back to that. And so I use this as my mantra. Technology enables the museum's mission. It allows you to do things you can't do today, reach new audiences, all of those things. And I think it's important to present it and the ideas that we're presenting today in that context. So the other way I think is to think about digital and technology is what can't you do in the real world? What are some of the things that you can't do? And how does technology let you do that? Because sometimes we get into a conversation around, well, we don't want technology in our museums, or we're concerned about having technology in our museums because, it takes away from the experience, and particularly in some of the beautiful museums that you have in Italy. It takes away from that, heritage experience. But the real value comes when you can do something you can't do. And so, there's a tremendous exhibition that's just, there are examples all over the world, that's just opened in the US around Krishna, which is one of the Cambodian gods. And they have a statue, but it's not all complete. And so they've managed to use augmented reality to be mixed reality to be able to complete the view of that so you can see it as it was originally intended from hundreds of years ago. That's a great application of technology. It's not about putting screens. It doesn't have to be about putting screens in galleries and things like that that detract from that experience. So when I look at those things, what are those things that digital can do that you can't do in the real world? Well, one of them is seeing things that are very, very small. So if you look at a gem, for example, it's very hard to fully appreciate everything about a gemstone because it's so small, or it could be an insect, for example. Things that are very, very large is another one. So it's very hard to sort of come to grips with or understand something that's extremely large. Something that we're all dealing with today, multiple languages. One of the great uses of technology is how can I talk in one language and you understand it in another, which is just so important for, how the world collaborates. Catering for people who have disabilities, who can't hear, who can't see, those kinds of things, but also multiple perspectives, as is often the case in discussions in museums, which is how do we provide multiple perspectives on collection. So I think I just want to center us back to where do we use technology and why should we use technology? And so, but the new world is very much about bringing physical and digital together. And it's a hard thing for us to understand, but we're already living in that world. We're already living in a world where you're not actually sure anymore that everything you see is actually real, right? And we hear this with things like what are called deep fakes, right? So images, right? So we used to be always look at an image and we knew that that image was actually something that had existed in the real world. But we don't know that anymore because, for years now, we've had the ability to edit images and now it's just becoming much more sophisticated. I'm not suggesting that's what we want to do, but we're getting, that's only just starting to touch as we bring these worlds together. We're going to get to a point where we're living in a universe, it's a little scary, but living in a universe where the physical and the digital come together. I'm going to show you some examples of this, not about they're very separate worlds. And as I said, it's about how does it actually add to the physical experience. It's not a bad thing. It's actually good. It actually augments our life in so many ways. So before I get into that, though, I just want to quickly talk about how we think about digital transformation here at Microsoft with respect to museums, and point you to this resource. I have, this is something that I've developed. There are a lot of more supporting materials here as well. But the idea is to think about what is your digital strategy? How do you think about how digital adds to a museum? And what are all the what the holistic view about what those things are? And so we talk about how we enhance the visitor experience. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is here in this beyond the walls section. How do we start to take the museum beyond the walls of the physical building and also work with the physical building? So, but there are other areas. There's whole areas of digital transformation, which we're not covering today, but exist around how do we look at our collections? How do we look at research, digitizing them, discoverability of collections using artificial intelligence? How do we run back in dynamic operations? How do we run our organizations better? How do we manage our buildings, smart buildings, energy consumption, sustainability, all of these kinds of things. So it's important for me to just touch on this briefly, because this is how we look at the holistic digital strategy of a museum, of which one piece is the visitor experience. But all of it comes together in service of that mission. So I like to think of museums as living, we always used to have this physical museum. Everything was centered around the building. But I like to think that today in 2021, that we're part of a larger ecosystem, because the reality is there are people who come to visit the building, but they're not the only people who are interacting with your museum or could interact with your museum. There are lots of different ways to interact. There's lots of different ways to engage, only some of which are coming to the building. Now, I want to be clear, the building is important. I don't think that the building goes away in any way, in any shape or form, but it's about additive. A lot of what I said about digital is about adding to, not taking away. So, the reality is today that people are accessing information about museums from their homes, particularly whilst we were all working remotely. People are accessing it from the classroom. We have this idea that schools need to come to the museum, and they can and they should, but also museum can come to the school virtually. Right? People are traveling. In their process of traveling, they're looking for things to keep themselves interested, and museums is another source of information for them. But also, people are elsewhere in the world. I'm equally interested in an Italian museum from where I sit here in Seattle as I would be if I was in Italy. And so it's another, so I want us to think about this ecosystem that comes together, of which the physical museum is just one channel. We've always focused on very visible technologies. So things that you can see, screens and things like that. But I want to bring us today into thinking about things that are maybe Brave New World, but, a different level of experience. So that goes beyond this, and hopefully you'll feel very inspired, and this is definitely where the world's going. And then Hevolus is going to be talking about their fabulous examples in this space. So the next generation of experiences, the experiences that we are creating 2021 to 2025, are very much three-dimensional and immersive. When you think about it, the idea of having a two-dimensional experience in front of a screen is actually limiting. It actually has certain constraints, and how could we achieve that? And if you look at the history of technology, the history of technology is always about removing a constraint to make it a more natural experience. And, so if let me see if I can come up with a good example there. Maybe the best one is the idea of 3D and immersive. 2D, where I'm just looking at, we all know that when I'm looking at people on a screen, it's not the same as being in person. The constraint that we want to get rid of is how do we make it a more natural experience? So there are 5 core technologies that get us here. And I'm going to talk about them each briefly, and then I'm going to bring them all together into, what does this really mean for the world? And then Hevolus is going to bring this together into, tangible examples. The very first one is what's called the Metaverse. I'm going to go into each of these in detail. So just bear with me. The second one is digital twins, spatial anchors, object anchors, and mixed reality. So it's okay if you don't know what these are. You probably know what mixed reality is. It's okay if you don't know what these are, but just bear with me as I talk through what these are and how they come together to create these amazing experiences. So the very first one is what's called the Metaverse. I've actually been talking about the Metaverse for quite a while now, but it's only just started to become, in the last even month, something that's become much more in the mainstream conversation. But the idea of the metaverse is, how do you solve the problem of bringing people together who are in multiple locations in an authentic way to collaborate together just as you would if you were all in person? And so if you look at this example here, we have this man here. He actually exists in this particular photo, in this particular space. Like, he really does exist there. This person here off to the left that I'm pointing to is actually an avatar. So this person here is present somewhere else in the world. It could be on the other side of the city. They could literally be on the other side of the world. But they're presenting themselves as an avatar. And they are going to have all the gestures and expressions and others that you would expect from a human in real life. And they're participating in this conversation. And then this person here on the right is actually here as a hologram. So literally, this is what he looks like in real life. He's somewhere else in the world, and he is also equally participating here. But here it's actually what we call volumetric capture. It's actually a representation of what he really looks like. But all three of them are in a conversation. And then if you look here, it's a little subtle in this blue section here. This is a 3D rendering of whatever it is that they're talking about. Now, you could imagine yourself in a museum setting where you have the same thing, but this rendering here is actually of an object. It could be an object from another museum. It could be a precious object from Egypt, for example. It could be something from your own collection. It could exist in real life. But the idea here is we're no longer on a video conferencing screen, but now we're having an authentic conversation with all the gestures and facial expressions as if we were in the room together. This is the future. This exists now. This is where the world is going. So one is the metaverse. Here's another example of it here. You can see we have a bit better. We have two avatars, this man here in red, this woman in green. These two people exist in real life. And then this is something that they're working on together that is actually a 3D rendering of something because it exists elsewhere. So you have the idea that people and things can be in different places all coming together. The second one is the idea of digital twins. So what is a digital twin? Digital twin is taking a physical world and creating an exact replica taking something in the real world, creating an exact replica digitally. Now, why would you do that? This started in manufacturing. This started with the idea of how can I take a whole manufacturing floor, create a digital version, and then manage, because it has sensors all the way through it, and literally manage what's happening on the factory floor from an office, from anywhere in the world. And it completely revolutionized the manufacturing process. And now I think about, well, how do I bring that into a museum, which is actually what I spend a lot of time with. What happens in another industry? How do I bring it to another museum? And so you think about a precious collection object that you want to make accessible to people, but you can't bring it out of storage because, it's too precious. It's hundreds of years old. It's very fragile, etc. People still want to interact with it. One of the sad things, but one of the things I understand is I see rare books throughout the world. People take me through their collections and show me their rare books or their rare objects, but nobody gets to see them and interact with them. So digital twins, how do you take a replica or something and manage it and make it available anywhere in the world? Third one is what's called spatial anchors. Spatial anchors, technical term, the idea is, how do I take something which is a digital twin, essentially, and place it somewhere in the world? I could place it in, you guys are in Italy, I could place it here in Seattle, right? I could take an exhibition or an object from your museum, of course with your permission, and make it available to myself here in Seattle. It could be at the museum in Seattle, for example, so I get this idea of placing something, what I call parking something, somewhere in a physical location, and it's persistent. Like it can stay for 3 months, it could stay forever. But we always talk about objects and the idea of you have to go and get them. But what if the object was already there? So park that idea. And then the reverse of that is what we call object anchors, which is when I take content and align it to a physical object. So the perfect example of this is using it in your museum. So I take a 3D content and align it to a painting, say, that you have in your museum. And it takes away from, if anyone's ever tried to do this idea of content that shows up, that augments an exhibition, it relies usually on wayfinding or other kinds of technologies. So it just makes it a simpler access to that ability to augment. So you've got taking content and parking it somewhere in the world, and you've also got taking content and aligning it to a specific object so it only appears with that object. And then, of course, we're all very familiar, I think, at this point with augmented and mixed reality. This is the Krishna god that I was speaking about earlier. But this, they're trying to show what it looked like in Cambodia, in the cave that it was found in, for example, where it's actually lifting up this mountain. So it's about blending physical and digital together. So we have these 5 technologies. And so when you bring these technologies together, it gives you this opportunity to experience museums anywhere, anytime. It lets you place immersive experiences in your museum, but also anywhere in the world. It's a revolutionary concept. And we could take those exhibitions and put them anywhere in the world and allow many people to experience them. It also supports this idea of multi-user shared experiences when people are in multiple locations. So it could take my family in Australia and myself here in Seattle and allow us to visit a museum in Italy together and have an immersive shared experience. That's revolutionary. That's exciting stuff. It also allows us to take our existing museum objects and augment them, which is something that we're all doing today, but we're not doing these other 2 yet. But this is where the world is going. Hevolus are going to talk about the amazing innovations that they have done, but in particular, the experience that I want to call out is something that they've done with Castel del Monte. They're an amazing partner for us here at Microsoft. They're doing some really innovative things, and we're excited to be working with them. But I'm not going to steal their thunder and let them talk a bit more about that. So with that, grazie. I really thank you for the opportunity to talk to you all today, and would like to hand it over to our colleagues at Hevolus.
Che possono cambiare quindi in modo molto significativo il modo con cui possiamo fruire anche
in which we experience culture. So we have the 5G analytics and of course the digital infrastructure, because it is important to have a high performance, reliable broadband connection, which is basically the basis for the technologies and solutions Antonio will be talking about. Now, when it comes to the 5G, I think most of you heard about it, and very often 5G is considered innovative technology in terms of speed. When it will be up and running with your smartphone, you will be able to download up to plus than 10 gigabytes per second. So this means not just a movie. I mean, a movie in just a few seconds, a whole movie. And so, everything is going to be different in terms of content management. But there are also 2 more features. First of all, in addition to speed, the low latency, which is basically the response of the network to a impulse. It is like our nervous central nervous system. Basically, we get the impulse from the brain and we immediately reply and react, for example, when there is a situation of danger. Now, with the 5G, we would like to reach zero latency, which is extremely important, for example, when it comes to the medical sector. For example, if a surgeon has to perform a procedure, surgical procedure, using a robot, it is important to have a zero latency. So when the surgeon presses the button, the action is immediately done on the patient. And this is something already done at the San Raffaele Hospital. But when it comes to cultural assets as well, I mean, zero latency is very important. There is also another aspect, which is the possibility to connect a very high number of devices. Basically, every one of us has more than one SIM card, and in the future, well, the important thing would be the number of devices which we connect to the internet. This is why we say Internet of Things. Internet of Things is the ability of things to transfer information. And this will be possible also in the museums, for example, where you have specific sensors that can measure important parameters, for example, for the safety of the works of art in the museum, but also to track, for example, humidity or lighting. So these parameters are very important in order to ensure the preservation of the works of art. So with the 5G, we can manage more than 1 million devices per square kilometer. So this means that this will be much more efficient, and Internet of Things will be used in different places like museums, for example. I would like now to show you a video that shows you what it will be possible when it comes to the managing of the works of art, but also when it comes to entertainment using the 5G. For example, we now have a holograph technique with interesting experiences on TV. In particular, that was during X Factor 13. So we had the singer Gianna Nannini. She was in Berlin actually, but people there in Milan had, the feeling that she was on stage. And we actually repeated the same experience together with Piero Angela. And I would like to share with this short video what we did. So let me show you what we did. Piero Angela, this man was in Rome. He was sitting on the armchair, and we moved it to Milan on the stage. So you see him, there were people talking. So suddenly, Piero Angela was there on stage, and that was basically a great experience, zero latency. Because basically when Piero was talking to the people, well, there was no delay in communication, so the experience was great. If you have latency, basically there wouldn't be, such a, let's say, reactive communication. And it is like when you get a simultaneous translation, of course, there is basically a short delay. That's mandatory when you translate. But with this technology, basically, we managed to reach zero latency. And you can also have a look at our booth where you can see our solution. So, this technology is a great opportunity in museums. For example, you can have a person or a guide or a museum director who appears, who is there, and so it looks like the person is there in the same room with you. And we are doing it at experimental level, but the 5G application to tourism and education, well, this is something we are doing in Catanzaro in particular, thanks to a project that makes it possible to use 5G in this context in order to create immersive reality, as Catherine said, when it comes to culture and museums. So when, for example, optical fibers cannot be used, so by using 5G, we can, however, ensure an experience which is very similar to the cloud gaming. I think if you have children, you know how it works. So basically, tourist contents can be made available using this technology. There is also another technology I would like to describe, which is analytics. Well, I think all of you have this device in your pockets. These devices exchange information on the net, and not thinking about your messages or the website. I mean, I'm talking about the interaction of the device with the net. We collect these interactions on a daily basis. So 30 billion records a day. And so basically this is, let's say, another part of our activity. So this type of information is anonymous, so to guarantee privacy. And this type of information is paramount if you want to know, for example, how people move in a geographical area. We can monitor tourist flows in a city, or you can understand, for example, how many people visiting a museum on a daily basis. I mean, you can get the same information maybe using other tools, but you can get much more information about these people. So, for example, the visitors, where did they come from, if they are Italian, and from which geographical area. And also, you may also know if they came by car or by using another transport means. So this is important in order to, let's say, perform, for example, advertising campaigns. So let me show you a short video, quite a nice one, because it gives you a clear idea of what you can do with analytics. This is based on our infrastructure, which is already available, so no major investments is required. So, for example, we are getting information on where Italians do on holiday, where Italians go on holiday. And this is another animation that shows you that we are able to monitor car flows. So these are basically cars running on our highways, and basically you can do the same for a physical place, for a museum, for an archaeological park. And so this kind of information is extremely important, because also when it comes to museums, sometimes we do not have enough information about visitors. Some visitors leave their own details, but most often they just buy the ticket, but we do not know who they are. And on the contrary, it is quite interesting to know where they went, and this is important in order to create strategies, marketing strategies, and this can really make a difference also in terms of marketing, promotional activities. Very last piece of information, and then I will give the floor to Antonio. I would like to show you some other experiences. Analytics, for example, was used also in the cultural park, let's say cultural park of Dolomites, and you know that this is a UNESCO heritage. And thanks to this technology, we had a better idea, a clear idea of the tourists, where they came from, and in particular, I mean, this type of information is then provided to UNESCO. And at the same time, we were able to prepare the origin and destination matrix or mapping to know exactly where the people come from and where they go. So all the things are really inspiring, but the starting point is the digital infrastructure. And this is basically where, you know, our, let's say, DNA comes to play, because we use, I mean, we call chicken network, and basically this refers to all connectivity assets, because of course all the things I described can be done provided that we have a broadband, fiber, Wi-Fi connection, for example. So it is paramount to help and support, let's say, museum managers or directors with the best connectivity. We can do that because we have the right technologies, but also because we were awarded, say, some agreements, and so purchasing the services is much easier. We know that, you know, when it comes to the public administration, there are some constraints and rules, and, you know, making the purchase easier is also important. Let me conclude by describing what we are doing in Pompeii, the archaeological area of Pompeii and Colano. First of all, we guarantee the broadband in all sites. We implement a perimeter security lines in order to ensure security, because sometimes some cyber attacks are conducted, so we needed the infrastructure to be secure and safe to ensure exchange of information. And also, we are using analytics in order to better understand the trends in terms of visitors visiting the park. So it would be also interesting to see how they visit the park and the site, and this is something we can show. For example, we can see what people do depending on where they come from. Some studies were carried out in Turin after the Expo in Milan, because the idea was to get a clear idea of tourists and tourists' flows and where do they go. In particular, for example, Chinese or German tourists, where did they go? So this, of course, is data in anonymous form. These are only some of the things we are doing. There is much more. Once again, you come and visit our stand, our booth. Before giving the floor to Antonio, I would like also to talk about blockchain, and we can use the technology also in the art world. We are actually developing a new technology that we make it possible to ensure the works of art are authentic, and so that we can certify, let's say, the life of a work of art in terms of restoration, origin, and so on and so forth. And so we are also, I mean, carrying out other things, other experiences with Antonio. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, before holding a speech, I always wonder, what is the objective of my speech? Well, you know, I would like you to go back home with a take-home message. Can you hear me now? All right. I will repeat it. Usually, when I am preparing a speech, I always try to give my audience a take-home message. So, well, when I am in the audience, I like to understand immediately the usefulness of the speech. With regard to crypto art, well, how is it generated? Now I'm going to give you some examples. And I'm referring to Francesco also. I'd like to give you some practical examples. We have this obsession for use cases. Our motto, our slogan is to show exactly what you can do with technologies. So as I said, I'm going to give you a practical example. All the things that the previous speakers have explained are very interesting. Now I'm going to show you some use cases. I'm going to show you a video, inside the Castel del Monte. Well, inside the Castel del Monte, it's impossible to hang anything. You can't put a nail or anything. There are 8 empty walls. You can't use TV screens or anything. So we have reconstructed in a very loyal way. This is very important to say. We don't want to be IT experts. With us, we have art experts. Because, we need to recreate totally loyal contents. Just like what Francesco did with the Tanova. Any content we will use, it has to be done by experts, by people that have studied the matter, the subject for many years. We will then help museums describe the customer journey or doing storytelling. That's our job. But from the historical point of view, we need to be very loyal. So what I mean is that we are really collaborating with art historians that reconstruct the setting of our work. Because nobody can criticize us, nobody can put the blame on us or criticize us. We can't. We want to talk about real culture and real art. This is why we have to be totally loyal and totally truthful. All right, now I'm going to disassemble the video on purpose. You know, these experiences have to be done with any device the customer has. So the customer is not forced to wear a visor. It could be glasses, it could be something from the web, it could be some apps. So the main concept is the multi-device. It can be any content and it needs to be accessible by using any device the customer has at home. This is fundamental when we conceive these systems of augmented reality, extended reality. We want to make sure that anyone can have this experience. Do you want to do it with a visor? All right. Do you want to do it with Lawrence? That's okay. Do you want to do it with augmented reality with the Apple mobile? That's it. Okay. Or also you can do it with the web, by the web. So you can have access to the museum webpage, and then you will have like a 3D tour of the museum as if you were walking inside the museum. The main point is that the platform has to be similar to these gaming situations, but the contents have to be impossible to criticize. So we will never reach a compromise with regard to the content. It has to be multiplayer, as I said. I am inside a museum via web, and I can connect myself to a tourist guide who is now physically present in Castel del Monte. So the tourist guide is walking inside the castle. The tourist guide is projecting some holograms that you can see from home by using your glasses. So multiplayer, again, this is the main concept. It might seem absurd, and this is real gaming, really, from the infrastructure point of view. But from the experience point of view, it has to be perfect. So this is the customer journey. How has it been conceived? And we will try to take it from the luxury and the retail to the museums, because we come from the luxury and retail field. There's a customer that wants to live an experience. He or she wants to go back to that place in order to meet some friends who are now in New York and not in Rome. So they will need to meet inside that museum space with a colleague of mine who is now physically in New York, and together we want to visit the museum. That's the main point. Museum augmented with holographic objects and create harmony. Harmony is a word that we always use with our Vodafone colleagues. Anything we do, it has to be done following common sense, elegance. Well, this is fundamental because we want to do beautiful things. Therefore, well, the visitor registers on the museum online platform. Then the visitor reserves an online tour of the museum. And therefore, there will be some tourist guides that can organize real tours. 5 people might be there at the museum, but then another 5 might be all around the world. So the visitors will have access through any platform. The visor is connected via Zoom or Teams, so the customer, through a normal platform, will be able to see what the tourist guide, who is now walking inside the museum for real, what the tourist guide is explaining. And obviously, the people who are there in presence, they can also use the glasses, because I have placed the holograms in that point, so anyone will see them. The tourist guide shares her or his point of view through any device. The visitor will be able to have more details if he or she wants. So if I want, even if I'm following the tour from the screen, I can click in order to get more details, and then the visitor will leave a review about the use of the platform. So let's start and get used to this. It's not just about well, a museum displaying some works of art. Let's remember that there are some customers, some passengers, as I very often call them. The customer is a customer, so let's start and think about these customers who are hungry for an experience. And after living this experience, they will tell to their friends and colleagues, well, this was so cool. And they will invite other friends to do the same. These are customers that want to live these new feelings and emotions. And now very quickly about the advantages, because then I will talk about Metaverse. So images, any images, photos, multimedia, digital works, they can be unique thanks to NFT. What is an NFT? Non-fungible token. This is a cryptographic token that represents something unique. That a digital object, it might be a photo that the tourist takes by clicking on a statue. So that could be connected to an NFT, and then inside repositories or inside a virtual room, I will also be able to sell it, for example. So we just have to think about very simple things, not too complex. And so, there are, for example, OpenSea is the largest crypto money market, cryptocurrency market, with rare digital objects that anybody can buy. Crypto art is defined as artificial art certified and sold through blockchains. I'm not going to say which blockchains and which cryptocurrency. But, well, anyhow, this is one of the examples. For example, well, in New York, we have the first examples of crypto art. This work of art was sold for $69 million. It is by Beeple, this American artist, $69 million. What is it, though? It is an image, it's a photo. If we zoom in, there are 5,000 people represented on this photo. But the main point is that anyone who takes a photo, anyone who creates that digital photo, well, that's a work of art. You simply have to certify it. You simply have to connect it to an NFT. So, and these are some other examples. Yesterday, I was talking to David. I was also talking to a French colleague. We were talking about merchandising. This is merchandising. But what does a museum have to do? That museum has to create like a virtual landscape where any tourist can enter. They can also display their works of art and sell them. Any museum can have its own context and metaverse. And, well, they may have real works of art, virtual works of art connected. And also the customers will have the possibility to display their works of art. The customer is not the artist. It may be a lover of photography. And then it will be the museum organizing itself in order to sell these works of art on the market. So what is the main idea? The main idea is that many people talk about metaverse. If every museum had its own metaverse, well, it would be very interesting to connect museums between them. Physically, it would be impossible, but actually, it's not crazy to think to connect a museum in Rome with a museum in Paris. And if I have 2 million users connected to my museum, well, you know, if a person is in Paris and wants to invite a friend who's now inside the Uffizi Museum in Florence, well, we will have the possibility to have them meet together. So between the French and the Italian museum. In this way, we will create the museum multiverse. It may sound impossible, but actually this is a certification of the fact that that work of art is unique. No one can copy it. But, you know, the individual wouldn't be able to do it all. And, you know, then if that museum manages to sell a work of art by a private customer, is a great opportunity. Why not? That's the concept of the future of museums merchandising. It won't be a physical merchandising anymore. It will also be digital merchandising. So for those who produce merchandising, why not having co-creation with the Institute of Art from another part of the world, having young people creating digital works of art, displaying them inside their own museums. So visual merchandising. And I just wanted to give you some practical examples. I didn't just want to be rhetorical or just theoretical. And now I'm going to conclude. There are 2 main elements. First of all, the contents have to be perfect. And also it has to work perfectly. You know, without a connection, we can't do anything. Without security, we can't do anything. So again, these 2 pillars are fundamental. And then you can build your customer journey around them. And finally, we will see the customer not as a passenger anymore, not as a visitor. The customer is a customer that will take some other customers with him or her. A customer that will increase the average ticket. The customer will have to become our crazy supporter, leaving very positive reviews on the web page. And it will have to be viral. Thank you. Thank you again.